The gunshot that rang out across the dusty street of Hays City, Kansas, wasn't what made Dr. Genevieve Zimmerman drop her medical bag, but rather the sight of three grown men blocking the entrance to the only boarding house in town, their arms crossed and faces set in grim determination against her arrival on that scorching July afternoon in 1876. "We don't need no lady doctor here," the tallest one said, spitting tobacco juice dangerously close to her worn leather boots. "This ain't Philadelphia or Boston. This here's the West, and we got standards." Genevieve had heard variations of this speech in every town between St. Louis and Kansas. She was 24 years old, had graduated top of her class from the Female Medical College of Pennsylvania, and had spent the last 2 years trying to establish a practice somewhere, anywhere, that would give her a chance. Her fingers tightened around the handle of her bag, the same bag her father had given her before he died, before she knew the world would fight her every step of the way. "I understand your concern," she said, keeping her voice steady despite the heat and exhaustion weighing on her. "But the advertisement in the Kansas City paper specifically requested a physician for Hays City. I'm a physician. I came in good faith." "That advertisement was meant for a real doctor," another man said, shorter and rounder than the first. "A man doctor. We got women and children here who need proper care, not some girl playing at medicine." The irony wasn't lost on her, but Genevieve had learned that pointing out contradictions rarely changed minds. She was about to respond when a voice cut through the tension, smooth and unhurried, with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud. "That's interesting, gentlemen, seeing as how you've been without any doctor for 6 months now. My understanding was that Mrs. Henderson nearly died birthing her baby last month, because nobody here knew what to do when the bleeding wouldn't stop. But I suppose you'd rather have no doctor than a competent one who happens to be a woman." Genevieve turned to see a man leading his horse down the main street, tall and lean with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that touched his collar. He wore dusty range clothes and a gun belt that sat comfortably on his hips, the mark of someone who knew how to use it but didn't feel the need to prove it. His eyes, she noticed even from a distance, were a striking blue-gray, like storm clouds over the prairie. "This ain't your concern, Jack Yancey," the tall man said, but there was less certainty in his voice now. "Actually, Tom, it is my concern," Jack said, stopping a few feet away and looping his horse's reins around the hitching post. "Seeing as how the doctor is here on my recommendation. I was in Kansas City last month and heard Dr. Zimmerman speak at a medical demonstration. Watched her set a man's broken leg that 3 other doctors said would have to be amputated. She saved that man's leg and probably his life. So I wrote to her and told her Hays City needed someone with her skills." The revelation hit Genevieve like a physical force. She had received an anonymous letter describing the town's desperate need for medical care, offering a small stipend and the use of a vacant building for a clinic. She had assumed it came from the town council or perhaps a concerned citizens group. She certainly hadn't imagined it came from a cowboy who looked like he spent more time with cattle than correspondence. "You had no right," Tom sputtered. "The council didn't approve this." "The council has been arguing about it for half a year while people suffer," Jack said, his voice still calm but with an edge of steel underneath. "My sister died 3 years ago because there was no doctor to help her when she got the fever. I'm not watching more people die because of pride and foolishness. Dr. Zimmerman is here, she's qualified, and she's staying. The building on 2nd Street is ready for her, and I'll personally ensure she has everything she needs to set up her practice." "This isn't over," Tom muttered, but he and his companions were already backing down, unwilling to directly challenge Jack Yancey. Genevieve would learn later that Jack was one of the largest landowners in Ellis County, a man whose opinion carried weight not because he demanded it, but because he had earned it through years of fair dealing and hard work. As the men dispersed, still grumbling, Genevieve found herself alone with her unexpected benefactor. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes from squinting into the sun, the way his hands rested naturally near his sides, relaxed but ready. He was perhaps 28 or 29, she guessed, with the kind of face that could be hard or kind depending on the situation, though at the moment he was offering her a slight smile. "Dr. Zimmerman," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "I apologize for the welcome. I had hoped the town would be more reasonable. You wrote to me," she said, still processing this information. "You brought me here." "I did." He picked up her bag before she could protest. "I meant what I said in Kansas City. I watched you work, and I knew you were exactly what this town needed, whether they knew it or not. Come on, I'll show you to your clinic. It's not much, but it's clean and the roof doesn't leak." Genevieve followed him down the dusty street, aware of curious eyes watching from windows and doorways. Hays City was typical of Kansas towns in the 1870s, a collection of wooden buildings clustered around a main street, born from the railroad and sustained by cattle drives and farming. It had the raw, unfinished quality of a place still deciding what it wanted to be. "Why?" she asked as they walked. "Why would you go to such lengths for a stranger?" Jack was quiet for a moment, his long strides slowing so she could keep pace. "I told you about my sister, Emily. She was 19 when the fever took her. There was nothing anyone could do, but I've always wondered if a trained doctor might have made a difference. Then I lost my mother 2 years ago to something the traveling medicine man called women's troubles, which I later learned was probably something that could have been treated if we'd had real medical care." He stopped in front of a small building with a fresh coat of whitewash and a wooden sign that read, "Medical Office." "I don't want to see more people die for lack of care, and I don't believe that medical skill has anything to do with whether you're a man or a woman. I've seen enough of life to know that competence is what matters." The building's interior was indeed simple, but serviceable. There was a main room with a desk and chairs, a smaller examination area with a table, and a back room that could serve as living quarters. Someone, presumably Jack, had stocked it with basic supplies: clean linens, a lamp, a small stove, and even a few medical instruments, though they were basic compared to what she had in her bag. "It's perfect," Genevieve said, and meant it. She had expected to sleep in a tent if necessary. This was luxury by comparison. "Thank you, Mr. Yancey. I don't know how to repay this kindness." "Jack," he said, "and you'll repay it by taking care of the people here, even the ones who didn't want you to come. They'll come around once they see what you can do." She wanted to believe him, but experience had taught her otherwise. Still, standing in this little clinic with the afternoon sun streaming through the clean windows, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Jack set her bag down carefully. "I should let you get settled. But if you need anything, my ranch is about 5 miles north of town. Anyone can give you directions, and I'll spread the word that you're open for business." "Jack," she said as he turned to leave. He paused, looking back at her. "Thank you, truly. I've been turned away from so many places that I was beginning to think that you'd made a mistake becoming a doctor," he finished for her. "You didn't. The world's just slow to catch up sometimes. Give it time." After he left, Genevieve spent the rest of the afternoon unpacking her belongings and organizing the clinic. She arranged her medical books on a small shelf, laid out her instruments, and made the examination table as professional-looking as possible. The back room would be her home, at least for now. A narrow bed, a washstand, a trunk for her clothes, and a small window overlooking an alley. She had lived in worse during her training. As evening fell, she heard a timid knock on the door. Opening it, she found a young woman, probably no more than 20, with a swaddled baby in her arms and desperation in her eyes. "Are you the lady doctor?" the woman asked. "I am. Dr. Genevieve Zimmerman. Please come in." The woman entered hesitantly. "I'm Sarah Mitchell. My baby, little Thomas, he's been crying for 2 days straight, won't eat properly, and he feels so hot. The women in town tried all their remedies, but nothing's working. I heard you were here and I thought, even if you are a woman, you've got real medical training and I don't know what else to do." Genevieve gestured to the examination table. "Let me take a look at him." The baby was indeed feverish, his little face red and contorted with discomfort. Genevieve examined him carefully, her trained hands gentle as she checked his ears, throat, and abdomen. She had seen this before, an ear infection, painful but treatable if caught in time. "His left ear is badly infected," she told Sarah. "That's why he's been so miserable. I'm going to prepare a warm compress and give you a tincture to help with the infection and pain. You'll need to apply the compress every few hours and give him the medicine 3 times a day. He should start feeling better by tomorrow." Sarah's relief was palpable. "You can really help him." "I can and will," Genevieve assured her, preparing the treatments. As she worked, she explained everything she was doing, knowing that education was as important as treatment. She charged Sarah 50 cents, less than half what a male doctor might charge, and sent her home with detailed instructions. Word of little Thomas's recovery spread faster than wildfire. Within 3 days, Genevieve had treated a farmer's infected hand, assisted with a difficult birth, and diagnosed a case of diabetes in an older man who had been wasting away because everyone assumed he was just getting old. Each successful treatment chipped away at the town's skepticism, though she could still feel the resistance from some quarters. Jack came by on the 4th day, ostensibly to check if she needed anything, but really, she suspected, to see how she was managing. She was treating a boy who had fallen from a tree and broken his arm when Jack arrived, and he waited patiently while she carefully set the bone and applied a splint. "You're going to need to keep this still for at least 6 weeks, she told the boy, who was trying very hard not to cry in front of the cowboy. "I know it's difficult, but if you don't let it heal properly, your arm might not work right when you're older. Can you be brave for 6 weeks?" The boy nodded solemnly, and his mother thanked Genevieve profusely before leaving. "You're good with children," Jack observed after they had gone. "I like children. They're honest about their pain and grateful when you help them," Genevieve said, washing her hands in the basin. "Adults tend to be more complicated. Can't argue with that." Jack leaned against the doorframe, looking comfortable in a way that suggested he wasn't in any hurry to leave. "I heard you saved the Henderson baby's life last night when he stopped breathing. Word travels fast." She had been called out at 2 in the morning to the Henderson home, where their 3-month-old had stopped breathing during a coughing fit. She had cleared his airway and taught the parents how to recognize and respond to similar episodes. "He'll be fine, but they need to keep him away from smoke and dust as much as possible. His lungs are sensitive." "You're winning people over," Jack said. "Even Tom Brewster admitted yesterday that maybe having a doctor was better than not having one, even if that doctor is a woman." "High praise indeed," Genevieve said dryly, though she was pleased. She dried her hands and turned to face Jack properly. "I've been meaning to ask you something. That day in Kansas City, what were you doing at a medical demonstration?" Jack's expression turned slightly sheepish. "I read a lot. Always have. Just because I spend my days working with cattle doesn't mean I'm not interested in other things." The demonstration was free and open to the public, and the newspaper said they'd be showing new techniques in field medicine. I thought it might be useful to know, living out on the ranch. This intrigued her. Most cowboys she had encountered, admittedly not many, had been either actively hostile to education or indifferent to anything beyond their immediate concerns. Jack Yancey was proving to be something different. "What else do you read?" she asked. "Whatever I can get my hands on. Medical journals, agricultural science, history, some literature. There's a lending library in Junction City that sends me books when I request them." He seemed almost embarrassed by this admission, as if intellectual curiosity was something to hide. "I suppose it seems strange for someone like me." "Someone like you," Genevieve echoed. "A successful rancher who cares about his community and wants to improve himself." "No, Mr. Yancey, that doesn't seem strange at all. It seems admirable." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition of kindred spirits. Both of them were people who refused to be limited by others' expectations, who wanted more from life than the narrow roles society tried to impose. "Would you have dinner with me tomorrow?" Jack asked suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just the restaurant down the street, unless that would be inappropriate or unwelcome." Genevieve's first instinct was to refuse. She had learned to keep men at a distance, both professionally and personally. Getting involved with anyone, particularly here where she was trying to establish her credibility, seemed unwise. But there was something about Jack that made her want to say yes, something beyond his physical appeal or the kindness he had shown her. "I would like that," she heard herself say. "What time?" 6 o'clock. 6 o'clock, she agreed. Jack's smile transformed his face, lighting up those storm cloud eyes. "I'll see you then, Dr. Zimmerman." "Genevieve," she said. "If I'm going to call you Jack, you should call me Genevieve." "Genevieve," he repeated, as if testing how her name felt in his mouth. Then he touched his hat brim and left, leaving her standing in her clinic with an unfamiliar flutter in her chest. The next day moved with agonizing slowness. Genevieve saw patients in the morning, a steady stream of people with various ailments, from mundane to serious. She treated a woman's infected tooth, diagnosed a case of measles in a schoolchild and recommended quarantine, and lanced a nasty boil on a cowhand's neck. Each patient paid what they could, some in cash, some in goods. By noon, she had earned $2, a dozen eggs, and a loaf of fresh bread. She had brought limited clothes with her, mostly practical dresses suitable for medical work. For dinner with Jack, she chose her best dress, a deep green calico that brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. It wasn't fancy by Eastern standards, but it was clean and fitted her well. She pinned up her dark blonde hair, allowing a few tendrils to frame her face, and studied her reflection in the small mirror. At 24, she had learned to see herself as a physician first and a woman second, but tonight she wanted to be both. Jack arrived exactly at 6, cleaned up and wearing what were clearly his best clothes: dark trousers, a white shirt, and a vest. He had shaved and his hair was neatly combed, though one stubborn piece fell across his forehead. He looked different out of his range clothes, more refined but still undeniably masculine. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. "Thank you. You look very nice yourself." The restaurant was called Prairie Rose, run by a widow named Mrs. Chen, who had come west with the railroad workers and stayed when her husband died. She served a combination of traditional American fare and Chinese dishes, and she greeted Jack warmly, her attitude toward Genevieve noticeably cooler but not hostile. "Doctor," she acknowledged with a nod. "I hear you helped the Mitchell baby." "I did my job," Genevieve said. "How he's doing well, Mrs. Chen showed them to a table near the window. "Maybe you are a good doctor. Time will tell." After she left, Jack said, That's practically a declaration of love from Mrs. Chen. She's not easily impressed. I'll try not to let it go to my head. They ordered dinner and settled into conversation with surprising ease. Jack asked about her training, genuinely interested in the details of medical education. Genevieve found herself telling him about the struggles of being one of few women in her classes, the male professors who had tried to discourage her, and the few who had recognized her talent and pushed her to excel. "My father was a physician," she explained. "He encouraged my interest in medicine from the time I was small. He used to let me help him in his practice, teaching me about anatomy and treatment. When he died, I was 18. He left me enough money for medical school and a note telling me not to let anyone convince me I couldn't do it." "He sounds like a good man," Jack said. He was. He believed that healing was a calling, not a career, and that it didn't matter whether that calling came to a man or a woman. She smiled sadly. "I wish he could have seen me graduate. He would have been proud. I'm sure he would have been." Genevieve turned the conversation to Jack, learning about his ranch and the life he had built. He had come to Kansas 10 years ago, just 18 years old, with nothing but determination and a small inheritance from an aunt. He had worked as a ranch hand, saved every penny, and eventually bought his own land. Now he ran cattle and was experimenting with different breeding techniques to create hardier stock better suited to the Kansas climate. "Most people think ranching is just riding around and roping cattle," Jack said with a wry smile. "But it's really about understanding animal behavior, grass management, water resources, and market trends. It's as much science as anything else." "See, now you're speaking my language," Genevieve said. "Everything is science if you look at it the right way." They talked until Mrs. Chen started making pointed noises about closing, and even then they lingered outside the restaurant, neither quite ready for the evening to end. The summer night was warm, stars brilliant in the vast prairie sky. Genevieve had grown up in Philadelphia where the buildings blocked the sky and city lights dimmed the stars. Out here, the night sky was overwhelming in its beauty. "I never get tired of it," Jack said, following her gaze upward. "No matter how many times I see it, it's magnificent," Genevieve agreed. "Everything out here is so big. The sky, the land, the distances. It makes you feel small but also like you're part of something vast and important." "Is that why you came west?" Jack asked. "For the vastness?" "I came west because no one in the east would hire me," she admitted. "Every hospital, every practice, every opportunity was closed to women. I thought maybe out here, where things are newer and less settled, there might be room for someone like me. Though I was beginning to think I was wrong until I got your letter." Jack was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad you came, Genevieve. For the town's sake, certainly, but also for my own." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Genevieve knew she should be cautious, should protect her heart the way she had learned to protect herself professionally. But standing there under the prairie stars with this man who had believed in her enough to bring her here, caution seemed less important than honesty. "I'm glad too," she said softly. Jack walked her back to her clinic, their hands occasionally brushing as they moved through the darkness. At her door he paused. "May I see you again?" he asked. "Properly, I mean, not just when I'm checking on your supplies." "I would like that very much." "Sunday? I could take you out to the ranch, show you around, maybe pack a picnic lunch." "Sunday," she agreed. Jack looked like he wanted to say more or perhaps do more, but he simply touched his hat brim and said good night. Genevieve watched him walk away, his tall figure eventually disappearing into the darkness, and realized with a start that she was falling for Jack Yancey. It was both thrilling and terrifying. The next few weeks established a pattern. Genevieve's practice grew steadily as more townspeople overcame their prejudices and sought her help. She treated everything from colds to broken bones to difficult births, working long hours and building a reputation for skill and compassion. There were still holdouts, men mostly, who refused to see a woman doctor, but they were becoming the minority. Jack became a regular presence in her life. He came by the clinic several times a week, sometimes with a legitimate need like supplies or to ask medical questions about his ranch hands, but often just to see her. They had dinner together when her schedule allowed, and on Sundays, when the town mostly shut down, he would take her out to his ranch or on rides across the prairie. The ranch was impressive, several thousand acres of grassland with a sturdy house that Jack had built himself. He employed half a dozen men year-round, more during cattle drives, and treated them fairly, which Genevieve learned was not universal among ranchers. He showed her his breeding program, explaining with enthusiasm how he was working to develop cattle that could thrive in the harsh Kansas climate. Most ranchers just let their cattle breed randomly, he explained one Sunday afternoon as they watched the herd grazing. But if you're selective, if you breed the strongest bull with the hardiest cows, you can improve the whole herd over time. It's the same principle as any other kind of selective breeding. Like Darwin's theories, Genevieve said, impressed. Exactly like Darwin's theories. I read on the origin of species 3 years ago and it changed how I think about ranching. If evolution works through natural selection, why can't we use the same principles through deliberate selection? These conversations, as much as the physical attraction growing between them, drew Genevieve to Jack. He had a mind that questioned and explored, that refused to accept "that's how it's always been done" as a sufficient answer. She found herself sharing her own thoughts and theories with him, things she had never been able to discuss with anyone because most men either weren't interested or felt threatened by her intelligence. But it wasn't all intellectual companionship. There was a growing physical awareness between them, a tension that built with every accidental touch, every prolonged glance. Jack was careful to maintain propriety, never pushing beyond what was appropriate for an unmarried couple in 1876 Kansas. But Genevieve could see the desire in his eyes, could feel it echoed in her own body. One Sunday in late August, they rode out to a creek on Jack's property, bringing a picnic lunch. The spot was beautiful, cottonwoods providing shade and the water running clear and cool over smooth stones. They ate bread and cheese and cold chicken, talking about everything and nothing, comfortable in each other's presence. "I need to tell you something," Jack said after they had finished eating. His tone was serious and Genevieve felt a flutter of concern. "What is it?" "I'm falling in love with you, Genevieve." The words came out in a rush, as if he had been holding them back and couldn't anymore. "I know it's only been a couple of months, and I know you came here to build your practice, not to get involved with someone, but I can't keep pretending this is just friendship. Every time I see you, every conversation we have, every moment we spend together, I fall a little more in love with you." Genevieve's heart was pounding. She had known on some level that they were heading toward this moment, but hearing him say it made it real and immediate and impossible to ignore. "Jack," she started, then stopped, unsure how to put her feelings into words. "I came here to be a doctor. That's all I've ever wanted, all I've ever worked for. For years, I've been told I had to choose between medicine and everything else, between being a physician and being a woman." "I'm not asking you to choose," Jack said quickly. "I would never ask you to give up your practice. I know how important it is to you, how hard you've worked. I'm saying I love you as you are, doctor and woman and everything you want to be." "Let me finish," Genevieve said gently. She reached out and took his hand, feeling the callous strength of it. I was going to say that I came here to be a doctor, but I found something I didn't expect. You, and I'm falling in love with you too, Jack Yancey. It terrifies me because I don't know how to be both things, a physician and a woman in love, but I want to try. With you, I want to try. The joy on Jack's face was almost painful in its intensity. Are you sure? Really sure? Because once I hear you say it, Genevieve, I'm not going to want to let you go. I'm sure, she said. And then he was kissing her, gentle at first and then deeper, and she was kissing him back, her hands in his hair, his arms around her waist, both of them finally giving in to what had been building between them since that first day on Hayes City's dusty street. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Jack said, "Marry me, Genevieve. I know it's fast, but I'm sure. I've never been more sure of anything." "Jack, we barely know each other," she protested, though her heart was saying yes. "I know the important things. I know you're brilliant and compassionate and brave. I know you're dedicated to helping people. I know you make me laugh and make me think and make me want to be a better man. What else do I need to know?" "What I look like in the morning," she said, laughing. "How I react when I'm exhausted and frustrated. Whether we can live together without driving each other crazy." "Okay," Jack said reasonably. "So we wait a bit, get to know those things. But I'm going to ask you again, Genevieve, and I'm going to keep asking until you say yes." "That sounds like a threat, Mr. Yancey." "It's a promise, Dr. Zimmerman." They rode back to town in the golden light of late afternoon, hands linked between their horses whenever the terrain allowed. Genevieve felt like she was floating, giddy with happiness and also slightly terrified of how much she had revealed. She had spent so many years protecting herself, staying focused on her goals, that opening herself to love felt like stepping off a cliff. But if she was going to take that leap with anyone, she wanted it to be with Jack. Back in town, reality reasserted itself quickly. There was a man waiting at her clinic, his arm wrapped in a bloody cloth, and she shifted immediately into doctor mode. The injury turned out to be serious, a deep gash from a saw that required careful cleaning and stitching. Jack stayed to help, holding the lamp steady and providing extra hands when needed, never flinching at the blood or the man's groans of pain. "You're good at this," Genevieve told him afterward as they cleaned up. "You stay calm, you follow instructions. You'd make a good medical assistant. I've had practice. When you're out on the range with the nearest doctor days away, you learn to handle emergencies." He rinsed the bloody cloths in the basin. "But watching you work is something else. The way you knew exactly what to do, how to keep him calm while you stitched him up. You're remarkable, Genevieve." "I'm just doing my job." "No," Jack said firmly. "You're not just doing a job. You're saving lives and relieving suffering, and you're doing it despite every obstacle people put in your way. That's not just a job. That's a calling, like your father said. And I feel privileged to witness it." Words like that, from a man who truly understood and valued what she did, made Genevieve fall even more deeply in love with him. As autumn arrived, painting the prairie in gold and russet, their relationship deepened. They spent every Sunday together and most evenings when Genevieve's practice allowed. Jack taught her to ride better, to read the weather signs in the clouds, to understand the rhythms of ranch life. She taught him more about medicine, about anatomy and disease treatment, and was impressed by how quickly he absorbed the information. They also faced their first real conflict. It started when a man named Samuel Porter, a wealthy merchant from Kansas City, came to Hayes City to assess business opportunities. He was educated, refined, and when he learned there was a female doctor in town, he sought her out. Not for treatment, but out of curiosity, he claimed, though his interest quickly became personal. "A woman with your education and accomplishment could do so much better than this frontier town." he told her over tea at the hotel. Genevieve had accepted the invitation because he had made it sound like a professional discussion about medical opportunities in Kansas City. I have connections with several hospitals and charitable organizations. With my endorsement, you could have a position in the city, a real practice with proper facilities and respect. I have a real practice here, Genevieve said firmly, and I'm earning respect every day. But you're wasting your talents on farmers and cowboys, Samuel persisted. These people don't appreciate what you can do. In Kansas City, you would have access to the latest medical knowledge, the best equipment, colleagues to consult with. You're isolating yourself out here. There was truth in what he said, enough to make Genevieve uncomfortable. She did miss having colleagues, missed access to medical libraries and journals, missed being part of a larger medical community. But she also knew that what she was doing here mattered, perhaps more than it would in a city where there were already many doctors. I appreciate your interest, Mr. Porter, she said carefully, but I'm committed to Hays City. At least think about it, he urged, handing her his card. The offer stands, and I should mention if you were in Kansas City, you wouldn't have to worry about your position. I would ensure you were protected, provided for. A woman like you shouldn't have to struggle. The implication was clear, and it made Genevieve's skin crawl. Samuel Porter was offering her not just a professional opportunity but a personal arrangement, something between employment and courtship that would put her under his control. I need to go, she said, standing abruptly. Thank you for the tea. She left before he could say more, but the encounter left her unsettled. That evening, when Jack came by, she told him about it, expecting support. Instead, his face darkened with anger. He had no right to proposition you like that, Jack said, his voice tight. He didn't exactly proposition me, Genevieve said, though privately she agreed. He offered me a job, with strings attached. I know men like Porter. They see independent women as challenges to be conquered, things to be acquired. Jack paced her small clinic, agitated. You should have told him you're spoken for. Am I? Genevieve asked, suddenly irritated. We've been courting for 2 months, Jack, but you have no claim on me. I don't need your protection or your permission to make decisions about my career. The words came out harsher than she intended, fueled by her own uncertainty and frustration. Jack stopped pacing and looked at her, hurt visible in his eyes. I never said you needed my permission, he said quietly, but I thought we meant something to each other. I thought we were building toward a future together. We are, Genevieve said, softening. But Jack, I've fought so hard for my independence, for the right to make my own choices. I can't give that up, not even for you. Especially not for you. I'm not asking you to give it up. Jack's frustration broke through. I'm asking you to include me in those choices, to consider me when you're thinking about your future. Is that so wrong? They stared at each other, both hurt and angry, neither sure how to bridge the gap that had suddenly opened between them. Finally, Genevieve said, I think you should go. Fine, Jack said, grabbing his hat. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, I never wanted to control you, Genevieve. I just wanted to love you, but maybe that's not enough. After he left, Genevieve sat in her empty clinic and cried. She had been so happy, so hopeful about their relationship, and now it felt like it was falling apart because neither of them knew how to balance love with independence. 3 days passed without word from Jack. Genevieve threw herself into work, seeing patients and avoiding her own thoughts. Samuel Porter left town, but not before making one more attempt to convince her to come to Kansas City, which she firmly refused. She realized that what had bothered her most about his offer wasn't the offer itself, but the assumption that she needed rescuing, that her choice to be in Hays City was somehow a compromise rather than a deliberate decision. On the 4th day, there was an emergency. A farmhand from Jack's ranch came galloping into town, his horse lathered and exhausted, shouting for the doctor. There had been an accident. Jack had been working with a difficult horse when the animal had thrown him and then trampled him. He was hurt badly. Genevieve's medical training took over, suppressing the surge of panic. She grabbed her bag and rode out with the farmhand, pushing her horse harder than she ever had before. The 5 miles to Jack's ranch seemed to take forever, and every second her mind was racing with possibilities, each worse than the last. Trampling injuries could be catastrophic. Broken bones, internal bleeding, head trauma. When she arrived, they had moved Jack into the ranch house and laid him on his bed. He was conscious but clearly in severe pain, his face gray and sweating. His foreman, a weathered man named Cal, met her at the door. "Doctor, thank God," Cal said. "We didn't know if we should move him, but we couldn't leave him in the corral. He's hurting bad." Genevieve pushed past him and went to Jack's side. His eyes found hers, and despite the pain, there was relief in them. "Hey," he managed to say. "Don't talk," she ordered, already examining him. She could see bruising already forming across his chest and abdomen, and when she felt his ribs carefully, he gasped. Several were definitely broken. His left leg was swollen, possibly fractured. But his pupils were equal and responsive, which meant probably no severe head injury, and his breathing, though painful, was regular. No punctured lung, then, or at least not badly. "I need hot water, clean cloths, and someone to help me," she said crisply. "And send someone to town for my surgical kit. I left it at the clinic because I didn't know what I'd need." For the next several hours, Genevieve worked with focused intensity. She bound Jack's ribs, set and splinted his fractured leg, treated various cuts and contusions, and checked repeatedly for signs of internal bleeding. Jack endured it with gritted teeth, sometimes gripping her hand so hard she thought her bones would break, but never crying out. Finally, as evening fell, she had done everything she could. Jack was sleeping, dosed with laudanum for the pain. She sat beside his bed, exhausted and emotionally drained, and allowed herself to feel the fear she had been suppressing all afternoon. He could have died. If the injuries had been just slightly different, if the horse had trampled his head or ruptured something vital, she might have arrived to find him dead or dying. Cal brought her coffee and some food, which she accepted gratefully. "How is he, Doc?" "He'll recover," Genevieve said. "The ribs will take weeks to heal, and the leg will need at least 2 months. He's going to be in considerable pain and extremely frustrated at being confined to bed, but barring complications, he should be fine." "That's good news," Cal said with obvious relief. "Jack's a good boss, best I've ever worked for. We were all pretty scared." "So was I," Genevieve admitted. She stayed at the ranch that night, dozing in a chair beside Jack's bed, checking on him periodically. In the early morning hours he woke, groggy from the laudanum but more alert than he had been. "Genevieve," his voice was hoarse. "I'm here," she said, moving to his side. "How do you feel?" "Like I got trampled by a horse," he said, attempting a weak smile. "Which I suppose I did. How bad is it?" "Broken ribs, fractured leg, various contusions and lacerations. You're going to be laid up for quite a while and it's going to hurt, but you'll heal." Jack's hand found hers on the blanket. "I'm sorry," he said. "For the fight, for what I said, you were right. I was being possessive when I had no right to be." "I'm sorry too," Genevieve said, tears suddenly blurring her vision. "I was defensive when you were just expressing your feelings. And Jack, when I got word that you were hurt, I realized something. I don't want to face a life without you. All the independence in the world doesn't mean anything if I'm alone." "You don't have to be alone," Jack said. "And you don't have to give up your independence either. We can figure it out together, Genevieve. If you still want to." "I want to," she said, leaning down to gently kiss his forehead. "I love you, Jack, and yes, before you ask again, I'll marry you, whenever you're well enough to stand at an altar." Despite his pain, Jack's smile was radiant. "Best medicine anyone could prescribe," he murmured, and then sleep claimed him again. Genevieve stayed at the ranch for the next week, dividing her time between caring for Jack and seeing patients who came out from town. She set up a temporary examination room in the ranch house's front room, and people made the trek, partly out of necessity and partly, she suspected, out of curiosity about the female doctor who was nursing Jack Yancey back to health. It was during this week that she saw another side of Jack's life, the community he had built on his ranch. His men were loyal and hardworking, and they treated her with respect, following her medical instructions without question. They also talked about Jack, stories of his fairness and generosity, how he had helped them through hard times, how he paid fair wages and didn't abuse his authority. "He's a good man," Cal told her one evening. "Some bosses, they treat their hands like they're disposable, like cattle themselves. Jack treats us like men with families and lives that matter. We'd all do just about anything for him." This confirmation of what she already knew made Genevieve even more certain of her decision to marry Jack. He was good in ways that went beyond his kindness to her, and that goodness was woven into the fabric of how he lived his life. By the second week, Jack was improving steadily, able to sit up and even move around a little with assistance. He was, as Genevieve had predicted, a terrible patient, constantly trying to do more than he should and frustrated by his limitations. "I have a ranch to run," he grumbled as she changed the dressing on a cut that was healing nicely. "Cal's doing his best, but there are decisions that need to be made." "Then make them from bed," Genevieve said unsympathetically. "You're not going anywhere for at least another month. The more you rest now, the faster you'll heal and the sooner you can get back to work. Has anyone ever told you you're tyrannical when you're in doctor mode? Frequently. Now stop complaining and tell me about these decisions that need to be made." They fell into a new routine. In the mornings, Genevieve would see patients, either at the ranch or making trips back to her clinic in town. In the afternoons and evenings, she would care for Jack, and they would talk about everything from ranch management to medicine to their plans for the future. "I want you to keep your practice," Jack said one evening as they sat together, him propped up in bed and her in a chair she had pulled close. "After we're married, I mean. I know some people will expect you to give it up, but I don't want that. What you do is too important." "It would be easier if I could see patients here sometimes," Genevieve mused. "The ranch is centrally located and you have more space than my clinic. What if we set up an examination room here? I could split my time between town and the ranch." "That's a wonderful idea," Jack said enthusiastically. "We could convert one of the spare rooms. It would be better equipped than what you have now." They began planning their future together, making it as real and concrete as Jack's healing body. They would marry in the spring, giving Jack time to fully recover and Genevieve time to arrange her affairs. She would keep her clinic in town, but also establish a practice at the ranch. Jack would continue running his cattle operation, and they would support each other in their respective work. "What about children?" Jack asked one night. The question was tentative, as if he wasn't sure how she would respond. Genevieve had thought about this, of course. Medicine and motherhood were seen as incompatible by most people, but she didn't believe that had to be true. "I want children," she said. "I won't pretend it will be easy to balance family and practice, but I think it's possible, especially if I have a partner who truly shares the responsibilities." "You will," Jack promised. "I want to be a real father, Genevieve, not just someone who provides for his children but who raises them." And any daughter of ours will know she can be anything she wants to be, including a doctor like her mother. Conversations like this made Genevieve fall more deeply in love with Jack every day. He wasn't just accepting her career, he was actively planning for it, making it part of their shared future rather than something that would have to be accommodated or tolerated. By the time October arrived, Jack was mobile again, though still limping and under strict orders not to overexert himself. Genevieve had returned to sleeping at her clinic in town most nights, though she visited the ranch several times a week. The separation was difficult, both of them missing the enforced closeness of those first weeks when she had been his constant caretaker. It was during this time that Hays City faced its first real medical crisis since Genevieve's arrival, an outbreak of scarlet fever. It started with one family, then spread to 3 more. Scarlet fever was dangerous, especially for children, and could be fatal without proper care. Genevieve threw herself into managing the outbreak. She set up a quarantine area in the church, isolated the sick families, and taught people about hygiene and disease prevention. She worked 16-hour days, moving between patients, monitoring symptoms, and providing supportive care. There was no cure for scarlet fever, but proper hydration, fever management, and watching for complications could improve survival rates dramatically. Jack wanted to help, but Genevieve forbade it. His immune system was still weakened from his injuries, and she wasn't going to risk him getting sick. He chafed at the restriction but obeyed, instead organizing people to deliver food and supplies to the quarantine area so Genevieve could focus on medical care. Over 2 weeks, 7 families were affected, with 13 cases total. Genevieve barely slept, catching catnaps between patient checks. She was there when little Sarah Mitchell's daughter developed the characteristic scarlet rash, when Timothy Henderson's fever spiked dangerously high, when the Peterson twins both fell ill on the same day. And she was there when they recovered. Through careful monitoring and aggressive supportive care, she managed to save every single patient. Not one child died. When the last patient was finally declared fever-free and the quarantine lifted, the town's gratitude was overwhelming. "You saved our children," Sarah Mitchell said, tears streaming down her face as she hugged Genevieve outside the church. "You saved my baby girl. How can we ever thank you? You can trust me," Genevieve said simply. "When I tell you something is medically necessary, trust that I know what I'm doing. That's all the thanks I need." The scarlet fever outbreak marked a turning point in Hays City's acceptance of their lady doctor. Even the most stubborn holdouts had to admit that Genevieve's medical skill was exceptional, and that her gender was irrelevant in the face of such competence. Tom Brewster, who had tried to run her out of town on her first day, publicly apologized and thanked her for saving his grandson's life. "I was wrong," he said simply. "About you, about lady doctors, about a lot of things. I'm sorry for how I treated you, Dr. Zimmerman. This town is lucky to have you." After the crisis passed, Genevieve collapsed. The adrenaline that had kept her going for 2 weeks drained away, leaving her exhausted and shaking. Jack, who had been waiting anxiously for permission to see her, found her sitting on the floor of her clinic, too tired to even make it to her bed. "Hey," he said softly, lowering himself carefully to sit beside her, his healing legs stretched out. "It's over. You did it." "They could have died," Genevieve said, the fear she had been suppressing finally breaking through. "Any of them could have died, and I would have had to watch it happen, helpless to stop it. But they didn't die. You saved them all." Jack put his arm around her shoulders and pulled her close. "You're allowed to be scared, Genevieve. You're allowed to feel the weight of what you do. But you need to also recognize your triumph. 13 cases of scarlet fever and not one death. That's extraordinary. Genevieve leaned against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said. "You organized everything, made sure I had what I needed, kept me going. We made a good team." "We always will," Jack said, kissing the top of her head. "In sickness and in health, right? Might as well start practicing now." That night, Jack stayed with her, both of them sleeping in her narrow bed, fully clothed and chaste but needing the comfort of closeness. It felt like a preview of their married life: partnership, support, facing challenges together. As autumn deepened toward winter, Jack healed fully and Genevieve's practice continued to thrive. They set a date for their wedding, April 15th, 1877, when the prairie would be blooming and the weather would be good for celebration. Genevieve wrote to her remaining family, a few cousins in Philadelphia, to share the news. Their responses were mixed, some congratulatory, others disapproving of her marrying a cowboy and staying in the West. "They think I'm wasting my life," she told Jack as she read the letters. "That I should come back east where I belong." "Where do you think you belong?" Jack asked. Genevieve looked around her clinic, thought about her patients and the community she had built, thought about Jack and the life they were planning. "Here," she said with certainty. "I belong here." Winter in Kansas was harsh, with bitter cold and occasional blizzards that made travel difficult. Genevieve sometimes had to ride out in dangerous conditions to reach patients, and Jack worried constantly, though he had learned not to try to stop her. Instead, he taught her winter survival skills: how to navigate by landmarks when snow obscured the trails, how to recognize the signs of frostbite and hypothermia. "If you're going to insist on making house calls in blizzards," he said, wrapping a thick scarf around her neck before she headed out into a snowstorm to assist with a birth, "you're going to be properly prepared." The baby was born healthy in the early morning hours, a squalling boy who came into the world during a howling snowstorm. Genevieve, exhausted and cold, made her way back to town as dawn broke, the world transformed into white silence. She had never been happier. As spring approached, wedding preparations intensified. They would marry in the small church in Hays City, with a celebration afterward at Jack's ranch. Mrs. Chen was preparing the food, a mix of Chinese and American dishes that promised to be memorable. Genevieve was making her own dress, simple but beautiful ivory silk that she had ordered from Kansas City. Jack was building furniture for the room that would be her medical office at the ranch, making sure she had everything she needed. The night before the wedding, Genevieve stayed at her clinic one last time. Tomorrow she would move permanently to the ranch, though she would keep the clinic in town for patients who couldn't make the journey. Sarah Mitchell came to help her pack, chattering excitedly about the wedding. "Everyone's so happy for you and Jack," Sarah said as she carefully wrapped Genevieve's medical instruments. "It's like a fairy tale, the lady doctor and the cowboy rancher. Plus, you saved so many of our lives. You deserve happiness." "I am happy," Genevieve said and meant it. Despite all the struggles, despite the resistance and the doubt, she had found her place in the world. She had her calling, her practice, her community. And tomorrow she would have Jack. The wedding day dawned clear and beautiful, the prairie coming alive with spring flowers. Genevieve wore her ivory dress with wildflowers in her hair, and when she saw Jack waiting for her at the altar, tall and handsome in his best suit with tears in his eyes, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. They exchanged vows in front of what seemed like the entire town, promises of love and partnership and support. When Jack kissed her as his wife, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration that followed at the ranch was joyous, with music and dancing and more food than anyone could possibly eat. "Happy," Jack asked as they danced together under the spring stars, the party continuing around them. Deliriously, Genevieve said. Though I should warn you, Mrs. Peterson's baby is due any day, and I told her to send for me whenever labor starts, even if it's our wedding night. Jack laughed. I wouldn't expect anything else. That's who you are, Genevieve, and I love that about you. Just promise me one thing. What's that? That you'll let me share your burdens as well as your joys. That you won't try to carry everything alone anymore. You have a partner now in every sense of the word. I promise, Genevieve said, and kissed him, there under the vast prairie sky, surrounded by the people who had become her family. Their first year of marriage brought challenges and adjustments. Learning to live together, to balance their individual needs with their relationship, to support each other through stress and exhaustion and occasional disagreement. But they faced everything together, and their love deepened with each challenge overcome. Genevieve's practice flourished. The medical office at the ranch became as busy as her clinic in town, and she found herself treating patients from all over Ellis County. She taught basic first aid to Jack's ranch hands and offered classes for mothers on child health and disease prevention. Her reputation spread, and occasionally she received letters from other women considering medical careers, seeking her advice and encouragement. Jack's ranch continued to thrive as well. His breeding program was proving successful, and he began selling his cattle to other ranchers who wanted to improve their herds. He and Genevieve would often sit together in the evenings, she reviewing medical journals and he reading agricultural science, sharing interesting findings and discussing applications. In the spring of 1878, Genevieve discovered she was pregnant. The news was both thrilling and terrifying. She had delivered dozens of babies, but being pregnant herself was entirely different. Jack was overjoyed and immediately became protective to the point of being overbearing until Genevieve firmly told him that she was a doctor. She knew what she was doing, and he needed to trust her to care for herself and their baby. She continued working throughout her pregnancy, though she gradually reduced her more strenuous activities. The town and ranch community rallied around her, protective of their lady doctor who was now going to be a mother as well. Jack converted a smaller room near their bedroom into a nursery, building a beautiful cradle with his own hands. On a cold December night, Genevieve went into labor. She had planned for this, had another doctor from a neighboring town on standby to assist, but when the time came, her labor progressed so quickly that there was only time for Jack and Sarah Mitchell, who had become her close friend and had assisted at enough births to be useful. I can do this, Genevieve said through gritted teeth during a contraction. I've delivered dozens of babies. I know what to expect. Knowing and experiencing are different things, Jack said, holding her hand and looking terrified. Are you sure we shouldn't wait for Dr. Morrison? There's no time, Sarah said calmly. This baby is coming now. Jack, I'm going to need you to be strong and follow my instructions. Can you do that? Jack nodded, pulling himself together. He had helped with difficult cattle births. He could help with his own child's birth. Following Sarah's directions and Genevieve's own instructions, gasped out between contractions, they worked together. And as the winter sun rose, painting the snow-covered prairie in gold and pink, Genevieve gave birth to a healthy baby boy. A son, Jack said, tears streaming down his face as he held the squalling infant. We have a son. They named him Jacob William Yancey, Jacob for Jack's father and William for Genevieve's. Little Jake, as he quickly became known, was healthy and strong, with his mother's determination and his father's calm temperament. Genevieve took 2 months away from her practice to recover and bond with her son, but by late February, she was seeing patients again, often with Jake sleeping in a cradle in her office. "Some people thought you'd give up medicine after having a baby," Sarah told her one day, bouncing Jake while Genevieve examined a patient. "Then they don't know me very well," Genevieve said. "I'm a mother and a physician. I don't have to choose between them." Jack supported this completely, taking an active role in Jake's care from the beginning. He would watch the baby when Genevieve had to make house calls, change diapers without complaint, and walk the floor with his son during colicky nights. Their partnership extended to parenting, both of them equally responsible for their child's well-being. The next few years passed in a blur of growth and change. Jake thrived, growing into a curious, energetic toddler who loved following his mother around and helping her with her medical work. Genevieve's practice continued to expand, and she began training a young woman from town who wanted to become a nurse, passing on her knowledge to the next generation. Jack's ranch became one of the most successful in the region, and he began writing articles for agricultural journals about his breeding techniques and land management practices. He and Genevieve were respected members of their community, known for their intelligence, fairness, and generosity. In 1881, Genevieve gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Grace Emily Yancey. Emily for Jack's beloved sister and Grace because, as Jack said, their daughter was a grace note in their already blessed lives. Gracie, as she became known, was as different from her brother as night from day. Quiet where he was boisterous, thoughtful where he was impulsive, but equally loved. The house on the ranch expanded to accommodate their growing family. Jack built additional rooms, including a larger medical office for Genevieve with proper examination facilities and storage for her increasing supply of medicines and equipment. The ranch became known as a place where anyone could come for help, medical or otherwise, and they were never turned away. In 1883, tragedy struck when a drought hit Kansas. Crops failed, cattle died, and many families faced ruin. Jack and Genevieve worked together to help their community survive. Jack allowed families to graze their remaining cattle on his land and extended credit at fair terms. Genevieve treated people regardless of their ability to pay, often accepting nothing but gratitude. During this difficult time, their marriage was tested. Money was tight even for them, stress ran high, and there were moments of frustration and fear. But they clung to each other and to their commitment, remembering that they had promised to face everything together, in good times and bad. "We'll get through this," Jack said one night as they sat together after putting the children to bed, reviewing their accounts and trying to figure out how to make everything work. "I know we will," Genevieve said. "We always do." And they did. The drought eventually broke. The rains came, and slowly the community rebuilt. The families who had been helped never forgot the Yanceys' generosity, and the bonds of community grew stronger through shared hardship. As the decade progressed, Jake and Gracie grew into remarkable children. Jake, now 7, was fascinated by ranching and would spend hours following his father around, learning about cattle and horses and land management. Gracie, 5 years old, showed a keen interest in medicine, often sitting quietly in her mother's office, watching with serious eyes as Genevieve treated patients. "I think we might be raising another doctor," Jack told Genevieve one evening after Gracie had spent the afternoon carefully bandaging her doll's injuries. "Would you mind?" Genevieve asked. "Some people think it's not appropriate for women." "Some people are idiots," Jack said bluntly. "If Gracie wants to be a doctor, we'll support her. If she wants to be anything else, we'll support that too. Same as Jake. Our children will know they can be anything they want to be." In 1886, when Genevieve was 34 and Jack 37, They welcomed their third and final child, another son they named Thomas James, after Jack's mentor, the rancher who had given him his start, and James after a common family name on Genevieve's side. Little Tommy was a surprise, unplanned but deeply welcomed, and his arrival completed their family in a way that felt absolutely right. By now, Genevieve had been practicing medicine in Hays City and the surrounding area for 10 years. She was no longer the controversial lady doctor, but simply Doc Yancey, trusted and respected by everyone. She had delivered over 100 babies, saved countless lives, and trained 3 young women in nursing who had gone on to establish their own practices in other towns. Jack's ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in Kansas, but he never lost sight of what mattered most. His children knew their father as someone who worked hard but always had time for them, who valued education and kindness over wealth and status. His wife knew him as a partner who had kept every promise, who had supported her dreams as much as his own. On a warm spring evening in 1887, Jack and Genevieve sat on the porch of their ranch house, watching their children play in the yard. Jake, now 10, was teaching 7-year-old Gracie to rope a fence post, while 1-year-old Tommy toddled around under their watchful eyes. The prairie stretched out before them, vast and beautiful, bathed in golden sunset light. "You ever regret it?" Jack asked, reaching over to take Genevieve's hand. "Staying here instead of going to a city where you could have had more resources, more recognition?" Genevieve was quiet for a moment, considering the question seriously. She thought about the letters she still occasionally received from Samuel Porter and others like him, offering her positions in prestigious hospitals and research institutions. She thought about what her life might have been if she had chosen differently. "Not for a single moment," she said finally. "Here, I'm not just a doctor. I'm part of a community. I know my patients' names, their families, their histories. I make a real difference in people's lives every single day. And I have you and our children and this beautiful life we've built together. Why would I regret any of that?" "I'm glad," Jack said simply, "because I can't imagine my life without you. From the moment I saw you in Kansas City, setting that man's leg with such skill and confidence, I knew you were someone extraordinary. Bringing you to Hays City was the best decision I ever made." "Even though I nearly didn't come," Genevieve reminded him. "Even though the town tried to run me out on my first day, even then, the best things in life are worth fighting for." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the day fade into night, the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky. Jake called out that he and Gracie were going to put Tommy to bed, showing the responsibility that came with being the oldest. In a few minutes, the children would be settled, and Jack and Genevieve would have the evening to themselves, time to talk and plan and simply be together. "I love you," Genevieve said, squeezing Jack's hand. "I don't say it enough, but I love you more than I can express. You believed in me when no one else did. You supported my dreams and made them possible. You've been everything a partner should be." "I love you too," Jack said, pulling her close. "You're the most remarkable person I've ever known, Genevieve Yancey, and I'm honored to share my life with you." As the years continued to pass, their lives followed the natural rhythms of family and community. Jake grew into a fine young man, taking over more of the ranch operations as Jack began to slow down slightly, though he never lost his enthusiasm for the work. Gracie did indeed pursue medicine, and when she was 18, she went east to attend medical school, carrying with her all the lessons her mother had taught her about perseverance and dedication. Tommy, their youngest, surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for teaching. He loved books and learning and had infinite patience with the younger children in town. When he was old enough, he established a proper school in Hayes City, ensuring that the next generation would have opportunities for education. Through it all, Jack and Genevieve remained each other's greatest supporters and dearest friends. They faced the challenges of aging together. Jack's old injuries sometimes paining him in cold weather, Genevieve's eyes growing tired from reading medical texts by lamplight. But they adapted and adjusted, always finding ways to continue the work they loved. In 1895, Hayes City celebrated its 25th anniversary, and as part of the celebration, the town council dedicated a new hospital building in honor of Dr. Genevieve Yancey. The small clinic where she had started had been replaced by a proper medical facility with multiple examination rooms, a surgery, and space for training new medical professionals. Genevieve, now 43 years old and still actively practicing, stood beside Jack at the dedication ceremony, tears in her eyes. 20 years ago, they said a lady doctor had no place out west, she said in her speech. Today, I stand in a hospital that bears my name, surrounded by people whose lives I've had the privilege to touch. I came here because someone believed in me when few others did. I stayed because I found not just a place to practice medicine, but a home, a community, and a family. Thank you for giving me the chance to prove what a lady doctor could do. The applause was thunderous, and as Jack squeezed her hand, Genevieve looked out at the faces in the crowd. She saw patients she had treated, children she had delivered who were now adults with children of their own, people whose lives had intersected with hers in countless ways over 2 decades. This was her legacy, not just the hospital building, but the lives saved and improved, the barriers broken, the proof that competence and dedication mattered more than gender or convention. That evening back at the ranch, their children and grandchildren, Jake now had 2 children of his own, gathered for a celebration dinner. The house was full of noise and laughter, multiple generations sharing stories and making memories. Jack and Genevieve sat at the head of the table, watching their family with deep satisfaction. Later, when the children and grandchildren had left and the house was quiet again, Jack and Genevieve walked out to the porch, just as they had done countless times over the years. The prairie stretched before them, unchanged and eternal, a constant presence through all their years together. No regrets, Jack asked, echoing the question he had asked years before. Not a single one, Genevieve said. This life, this place, you, our children and grandchildren, my work, all of it, this is everything I ever wanted and more than I ever imagined I could have. Same here, Jack said. You know, when I was young, I thought success meant building the biggest ranch, having the most cattle, accumulating wealth. But I was wrong. Success is this: a partner who challenges and supports me, children who are good people making their own contributions to the world, work that matters, and a community where we belong. That's real success. They stood together in the darkness, Jack's arm around Genevieve's shoulders, her head resting against his chest. They were older now, their hair touched with gray, their faces lined with years of laughter and occasionally tears. But their love was stronger than ever, deepened by decades of partnership and shared experience. You remember the first time we stood here together? Genevieve asked. That Sunday afternoon when you proposed. I proposed down by the creek, Jack corrected with a laugh. But yes, I remember. I was so nervous, afraid you'd say no, afraid I was asking too much too soon. I was terrified, Genevieve admitted. I wanted to say yes so badly, but I was scared of losing myself, of having to choose between love and medicine. And now I know I never had to choose. You made sure of that. You kept your promise, Jack. You supported my work, you shared the responsibilities of family, You never asked me to be less than I was. Not every woman is that fortunate. Not every man is fortunate enough to marry a woman like you, Jack countered. You've made me better, Genevieve. More thoughtful, more compassionate, more aware of the world beyond my own concerns. Loving you has been the great privilege of my life. They fell silent, comfortable in the quiet, needing no words to communicate what they felt. The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed their first kiss, their wedding, the births of their children, all the moments big and small that had made up their life together. As they finally went inside to sleep, Jack's arm still around Genevieve, both of them knew that they had achieved something rare and precious. A true partnership, a love built on mutual respect and support, a life of meaning and purpose. They had proven that a lady doctor could have a place out west, and that a cowboy who believed in her could be her greatest ally. Their story would become part of Hays City's history, told and retold to new generations. The tale of the lady doctor who came west, despite being told she didn't belong, and the cowboy who said she had a place with him. It was a story of love and partnership, of breaking barriers and building community, of two people who refused to accept limitations, and instead created a life beyond what either could have imagined alone. And every night for the rest of their long lives together, Jack and Genevieve would stand on their porch, looking out at the prairie they both loved, grateful for the journey that had brought them together and the life they had built. They would hold hands and share the comfortable silence of people who knew each other completely, who had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs side by side. In 1902, when Genevieve was 50 and Jack 53, they celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary with a gathering that brought together people from all over Kansas. Former patients, now friends, came to honor the woman who had treated them with skill and compassion for over a quarter-century. Ranchers and farmers came to acknowledge Jack's contributions to Kansas agriculture. Their children and growing number of grandchildren filled the house with joy and noise. Gracie, now a practicing physician in Topeka, gave a toast to her mother. You showed me that being a woman didn't mean limiting my dreams. You proved that with determination and skill we could do anything. Thank you for being not just my mother but my inspiration and my role model. Jake, successfully running the ranch now that Jack had mostly retired, spoke of his father. You taught me that a real man supports the people he loves in pursuing their dreams. That strength means lifting others up, not holding them down. You showed me what it means to be a true partner. As Jack and Genevieve listened to the speeches and watched their family celebrate, they reflected on how far they had come from that dusty afternoon in 1876, when she had arrived in Hays City, to skepticism and resistance. They had built not just a life together, but a legacy of service and partnership that would continue through their children and grandchildren. The years that followed were gentler ones. Genevieve gradually reduced her practice, seeing fewer patients and spending more time training younger physicians. Jack fully retired from active ranch management, though he still walked his land every day, checking on cattle and enjoying the work he had done his whole life. They traveled some, visiting Gracie in Topeka and Tommy at his school, spending time with their growing number of grandchildren. But they always came back to the ranch, to the home they had built together, to the prairie they both loved. This was where they belonged, where their roots went deep into the Kansas soil, where their story had unfolded over decades. In 1908, on a perfect spring morning much like the one when they had married, Jack and Genevieve sat together on their porch. Jack was 61, his hair completely white now, his movements slower but still strong. Genevieve was 56, still sharp and engaged, though she had finally closed her practice the year before. "It's been a good life," Jack said, taking Genevieve's hand. "The best life," Genevieve agreed. "I couldn't have asked for more." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the prairie come alive with spring color. Wildflowers bloomed everywhere, painting the landscape in yellows and purples and reds. Birds sang their morning songs. The sun rose higher, warming the air and promising another beautiful day. Their children would come to visit in a few days, bringing the grandchildren. The house would fill with noise and laughter again. There would be family dinners and stories told, traditions passed down to another generation. Jake would discuss ranch business with his father. Gracie would share the latest medical developments with her mother. Tommy would bring books and ideas and his perpetual enthusiasm for learning. But for now, in this quiet morning moment, it was just Jack and Genevieve, as it had been at the beginning and would be until the end. Two people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life based on love and respect and mutual support, who had proven that partnership could exist between equals regardless of gender or conventional expectations. "I would do it all again," Genevieve said suddenly. "Every struggle, every challenge, every moment of doubt, because it led me here to you, to this life." "So would I," Jack said. "The moment I saw you in Kansas City, I knew my life was about to change. I just didn't know how much or how wonderfully." They shared a kiss, gentle and sweet, a reaffirmation of love that had endured for over 3 decades. Then they simply sat together, holding hands, watching their prairie content in the life they had built and the legacy they would leave. The story of Jack Yancey and Dr. Genevieve Zimmerman would be told in Hays City for generations to come. It would inspire other women to pursue medicine, other men to support their partners' ambitions, other couples to build relationships based on equality and respect. But more than that, it would stand as a testament to what was possible when two people believed in each other and in the power of love to overcome any obstacle. They said a lady doctor had no place out west. The cowboy said she had a place with him. And together, they proved that with love, determination, and partnership, any place could be home and any dream could become reality. They lived out their days on that Kansas prairie, surrounded by family and community, their love story complete and their legacy secure, a testament to courage, partnership, and the transformative power of believing in each other against all odds.